I love venture and that it gets capital to entrepreneurs. And we actually do it where entrepreneurs get capital to build their companies, to create their companies, to hire people, to create product, to ship, to create value, to grow the economy. I love that about venture. It's not right for every startup. And if you actually look at the history of like Fortune 500 technology companies, only I think Kauffman Foundation said that like only 15 to 20% of them took venture, which is astounding when you think about it. That a bunch of them were actually bootstrapped. How did they do that? Apple, I don't think, took venture. I don't believe Microsoft took venture. How do we actually create these growing companies without that injection of venture? That's a really interesting problem. At the same time, and it's a problem that I think developing economies are having right now, and middle-income countries are having right now. And how do you actually create a thriving startup technology software ecosystem and companies based on revenues and growing revenues? That's an interesting problem. I actually think that crowdfunding has a huge place to play in this. How do we get capital? The traditional structure is that a venture fund will raise capital from a fund of funds or from limited partners. Some of those limited partners are institutional pension funds, which get money from my aunt, who is a school teacher. So you have the school teacher contribute a little bit of every month into a retirement fund, which goes to the pension fund, which goes to a fund of funds, which goes to a venture fund, which invests that capital into an entrepreneur, into a startup. And it just seems very, it seems like a long way to go and a lot of middlemen. What if my aunt, who is a teacher, could actually invest $100 a month or $200 a month into a portfolio of startups, into a portfolio, highly curated, highly selected portfolio of companies that have a substantial chance of actually growing? That's really interesting. There was a recent study that came out from the University of Wilmington in association with the Kauffman Foundation. Wilmette, Oregon. I'll have to sorry, I screwed that up. But they actually said it was the returns of angels investing in groups. And angels investing in groups average over a large portfolio, hits driven, but they actually are averaging 3.5 to 4.5x returns over the first 4 to 5 years of their investment, which is really interesting. Angel groups are typically seen as like really not savvy investors. That venture is actually much savvier, but if that study is right, they actually have better returns than venture does as an industry, which is surprising. How do we actually create those sorts of returns for mom and pop investors wherever they are, in Peoria, wherever? I think that could actually be a substantial amount of money going into startups and into entrepreneurs and into small businesses. And if we can fix that problem here, we can also try to replicate that structure in developing countries. If you solve the exit problem and the liquidity problems as well. But at that point, you move GDP, which is really interesting. So it's been one of the reasons that we've been really, really interested in the Jobs Act and the crowdfunding as an entity to begin with, and we've just been following that very, very closely.